Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Ceeve Podcast. I'm Ale, and together with Veronica, we are the co-founders of Ceeve, the body that helps students and early career people to find the coolest opportunity in the coolest startups across Europe and beyond. Today, we have a really exciting guest, Dragos, marketing lead of Electricity Maps. Dragos, welcome. It's super nice to have you here. How are you?
Thanks, I'm good, and thanks for having me here. I'm excited to record.
Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe like just to start, can you give us your story, your background before going to jump on electricity maps?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm Romanian. I grew up in Romania up to my bachelor's, and afterwards I moved to Copenhagen, Denmark, where I've been based for the last 12 years or so. My very first job was as an intern in a startup in Romania during my last year of studies there. And that's kind of the first contact I had with the business world, with work. And it was a really small startup. We're about 6 people in a medical startup. It was my first contact with like the SaaS business, so to speak.
Yeah.
I worked there for about a year, and then when I moved to Denmark, I found a job in an iGaming startup. We're about 45 people at a time, so it was pretty big, growing organically. Where I started doing marketing, more specifically SEO. So the whole company was based on search engine optimization. Back in the
Okay.
day, that was an even bigger thing than today, if you can imagine. Yeah, that's the first time I saw a company really growing through the ranks and through time. As I said, when I joined, we were about 45 people, small startup, small company offices somewhere in the center of Copenhagen. And over the next 4 or 5 years while I was there, we grew and we started acquiring companies. We IPO'd on the Swedish Stock Exchange in 2018. So I got to see that full journey as a company grows and as the needs grow and bureaucracy increases and so on. And among the many things that I've learned there, one of the central ones was that I really don't enjoy that later stage of a company where everything gets a bit more political, a bit more bureaucratic.
Okay.
I was still only like 25 or so, so I really liked the earlier days. So when I found my next job, I worked in a yet again in an early stage startup. We're about 10 people, some business to business this time, a startup in the marketing software. So now it was more B2B. I was in charge of marketing early on to try to bring the product to market. It was very early on. I spent a few years there. Then I joined another SaaS, another early stage, so on and so forth. I've been around a bit. And I think over the last 6 or 7 years, I was kind of looking at what I'm doing with my job and with my daily time. And I had an idea of transitioning more towards the sustainability space. I didn't
Okay.
really know how to do that, but I felt that I want to do something with my time that adds to, what's happening in the world right now with climate change and everything becoming a lot more serious. I thought that, well, since I'm spending a third of my adult life doing work, might as well try to put that work towards something good. And that was just what I chose. And then it started like a bit of an uphill battle. It wasn't that easy to find jobs in sustainability back in the day. I think just before the pandemic, things started changing a bit where sustainability investments became a lot more profitable than traditional investments. So there were a lot of money flowing into the sustainability space, a lot more companies kind of coming up. So I kind of networked my way around and I tried to keep an eye out for everything while I was working in a startup that had nothing to do with sustainability. And then I think in 2022, I got an opportunity to join a startup from Denmark called Monta. They do electric vehicle charging software. So, when you want to plug in your EV to charge it, they build a software that handles the whole operation that happens before. So you can imagine payments, authentication, who does it belong to, who wires the money to who, is it smart charging, is it simple charging, how fast it is, and so on. And that was another pretty impressive growth journey. Again, I joined, I think it was about Series A, so we're about 60, 65 people. And then when I left last year, we were around 300 people. So that company as well
Okay.
had a pretty quick growth trajectory. It grew very fast, a lot of VC funding, just at the back end of VC funding kind of going down. And yeah, for the last year and a half or so, I've been working at a company called Electricity Maps. yet again, pretty early stage. We're about 25 people as we speak, but it's a bit different of a company. It's about 10 years old, so it's not a traditional VC fast growth pace, and that's a bit different. I think that sums it up mostly, at least when it
Yeah,
comes to my career.
yeah, that's
Okay,
great.
so can I ask you a little question? So we've seen a little bit of a pattern inside your career of joining these companies, maybe even at an early stage, and see and witness all the process of growth. And would you
Yeah.
say, is it something rewarding to see how a company can grow faster or even a little bit slower, but inside like your contribution to a company in a startup?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the most rewarding things. It also makes the job harder, right? In a
Mhm.
big company, you're like a small cog, so you feel like whether the business is doing well or not, you have very little impact to that overall thing. Unless you're at the top of the company, then of course you also have more
Mhm.
responsibility and more decision making power. But if you're, for example, a single person working in a 25-person marketing department, what you do on a daily basis is very unlikely to make or break that business. So that makes it less rewarding, but also, yeah, like when things are not going well, it's not exactly your fault. In a
Right.
smaller company, that's the reverse, right? So there's a lot more pressure because, so for example, until 4 months ago, I was the only marketing person in electricity maps. That meant if I'm not doing good work, our marketing isn't moving, right? There's no one I could
Mm.
blame. There's no one else to kind of absorb that fault. But it also means that the upside, when things go well, you do know whose credit it is, and that's a lot more satisfying.
Yeah.
And I think smaller companies, just by there being fewer people to make decisions, are just moving a lot faster, and that's something I personally find very satisfying. In a big company,
Mm.
if you want to make a decision, say, like, I don't know, you want to redo the homepage of the website or a solution page on your marketing website. Well, in a big company, that will be a multi-team project, and people will have opinions and feedback along the way. What you might end up with in the end is probably going to be like a product of compromises along the way, where it's so different from your original idea that it's not really a really good test of that. And it might also take 3 to 6 months just to do that, right? Whereas in a
Right.
small business, I am marketing in a way, right? So if
Yeah.
I want to make that call, I just make that call, and I live with the consequences after all. And that's something that at least is better attuned with my personality. I like to move fast and push forward rather than just waiting around for all of us to be okay with the decision, the shape, and everything.
Mm-hmm.
There's just two different worlds, and I think depending
Yeah.
on who you are as a person, you probably fit better in one of the two,
Yeah,
or maybe somewhere in between as well. And of course, I'm generalizing a lot. There are big companies that move fast. There are small
Right.
companies that are very political as well. So it really depends.
Cool.
yeah, it makes sense. And I think also like that type of ownership, like totally changed in the two different companies. So yeah, like it makes sense that it's also rewarding. And I guess there are also some disadvantages, some cons,
Yeah.
but like I think still can be worth it. And but like then like now you said that like at the end you had like a marketing role. Like, you have a marketing role now, a growth role, and you
Yeah.
always like was in charge of marketing and growth in general, or like you changed during your career.
Um, yeah, so I think it started in more traditional marketing in a way. My very early jobs were like managing WordPress websites and
Okay.
creating social media posts back in the day when social media was a really good organic channel, like even Facebook and so on was good for business. So it was very, very different, but it was always grounded in marketing. The first part of my career when it comes to, so if you think of like a T-shaped talent, I don't know if people still use that anymore, but the idea is that you have a layer of multiple areas that you're aware of, and then one that you're really specialized in. The one I was
Mm-hmm.
really specialized in early on was SEO. So that's what I did at that company called Better Collective that I saw growing all the way to IPO. That was like the whole company was doing that and different sides of it, and I became a specialist in that in particular. And after that job, I kind of wanted to figure out more of marketing. So I went into paid, I went into performance marketing, I learned a lot more about branding and so on. And then once you enter the B2B sphere, there are sides of marketing that just don't apply in B2C. So there's the whole CRM system part of it. There's customer success to prevent churn and increase the value of contracts over time, upsell, cross sell, and so on, which I was very interested and drawn to. And also with sales, right? Obviously, marketing in B2B works very close to sales. You want to generate leads for them. You also want to help them focus on the right leads. So there's a side of like nurturing, there's the side of scoring, all of these things that happen in B2B marketing I was drawn to. So I kind of expanded from pure marketing more into like a commercial role. I wouldn't know exactly how to define the boundaries of what I do. My title is marketing lead, but I've done everything from sourcing contact lists to help our sales team do outbound, cold outbound, like calling or emailing, all the way to the technical automation part of what happens when you get a lead. How do we score them? How do we make sure that they have the highest likelihood of making it to the meeting, to the demo, and post that? How do we make sure that the conversion rate is high all throughout the funnel? So yeah, I think like I started in marketing and now it's more of a generalist growth role. And I really like that because there's a lot of variety, right? You can, depending on the company, depending on the industry, the growth levers and the way you grow and what's important, which channel is the most productive for the company really depends on all of these variables. And if you're like traditionally, you'd know, I don't know, I know paid ads, for example. Well, great, that's good for a lot of industries, but you might be in companies where that's just not relevant or you don't have the budgets to do it. So that's where all of these other channels come to play. And for my roles, I've always liked that. I've liked flexibility. I've liked being agile and changing strategies and tactics depending on where the company is and what we're trying to achieve. I don't know if that answered it strictly.
Yeah,
but,
it did. It does.
Would you say, because you've worked in different companies that maybe belong to different industries, would you say that the skills and the knowledge you've acquired, was it so useful to apply something belonging originally to another industry in another, like there is a set of codes specific to an industry when applied to another industry that just gives the changing?
Yeah, I tend to think of them as tools in a way, right? So once you've done, say, SEO very, very seriously, that just becomes a tool in your toolbox. And you might join a new company, which is in an industry where SEO is a viable channel. That's when you use that tool, right? But it might be an industry where, and this is pretty difficult because people, I think, I forgot how the saying goes, but if you have a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. So there's the danger of that. If you're super specialized in SEO, then that might be your go-to strategy in a new company. You join a new company, you're like, we're going to build out content, we're going to do a lot of SEO. But if you don't do the research to figure out, is that actually a viable channel? Is there a lot of search volume? Do people click in SERPs? To do that, then you're kind of misled a bit. So in a way, everything I've done in my career has added to my toolbox. And I think jumping from company to company and industry to industry, in a way, kind of builds a more diverse working model of commercial engines in a way. Maybe that sounds a bit complicated, but it just kind of teaches you the different ways a company can grow, the different channels that are available, the different tools that are at your disposal, so you can more likely assess what's more likely to work in any given situation. Right. So I think it helps in those two ways. It builds up your world model when it comes to the commercial movement, and then all the tools that you acquire throughout your career that now you're more equipped for any given situation than before. That's kind of how I think of it.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Maybe first of all, we should ask you afterwards some hacks for CEO, because our website doesn't work. Maybe, but we can talk after about that. So if you can help us, it would be great. For sure, you know more than us. But beside that, I was curious now, also to talk more about your actual company, Electricity Maps. If you can tell us, what do you do? How does it work?
Yeah, so we're building the world's most comprehensive electricity data platform, which is a mouthful, I know. It, I can start from where the company was. So the company became a company through one of our products now. It's called Electricity Map. It changed name throughout time, but basically it's a real-time view of as much of the world as possible, which shows you the state of the electricity grid at any given time. So it shows you in each country you want to look at how much of the energy is coming from each generation source, meaning there's wind, solar, there's nuclear, coal, gas, and so on. There's biomass, there's all of these things. And initially it was just doing like the carbon emissions, which is very complicated. The carbon emissions of a kilowatt hour generated on any given grid is a sum of all of this generation, but it's not just the production in each country. For example, if you take the European grid, it's extremely interconnected. So France exports to Germany, Germany exports to Poland, Poland exports to somewhere else. And those things need to be accounted for. Our company came up with the mathematical algorithm to allocate those emissions to build as faithful of an image of the emissions of electricity at any given time. And that was the original idea, and it was just kind of like a project, and it grew. It got a lot of attention in the media. It got a lot of attention and traction on social media. Europe has been going through an electricity transition. Obviously, there are countries that are shutting down their nuclear plants, which brings a lot of renewable build out. And following that progress through our tool allowed people to build arguments and kind of argue with each other on Twitter and on Facebook and so on, and like different groups to say like, look, Germany's doing really well today, or in general, look, despite how much money this country has put into increasing renewables, their emissions haven't moved that much when it comes to electricity. So that's kind of like the core of the idea. And then it evolved, like we added, it now covers the whole world basically. And then we started building like compound metrics. So it's also like how much of the electricity at any given time in any grid is from renewable sources, or conversely, how much of it is from fossil fuel sources. And then in time, we started adding forecasting. So we have machine learning algorithms that look into the future, and they say, well, what is the state of the grid in the next 72 hours? Which starts allowing you to do a lot of good stuff. So like optimization, for example, the very, very obvious example is for EV charging, right? If you go home in the evening, you're not going to need your car immediately. And maybe you have 12 hours, 16 hours until you need your car, maybe more than that. If you plug in now, the emissions and the cost of electricity will be at a certain point. But maybe if you look into the future in the next 16 hours, you can identify a point in time at which, like say a 4-hour slot, where you want your car to charge for cheaper and for greener. And that's like smart charging, right? You can apply the same concept to data centers. That's a really big conversation right now. If there's flexibility in the need of data centers, and you can shift compute loads around. And we've long partnered with companies like Google, which actually do this. And they also offer it as transparency tools in their cloud platforms. So you can choose your server anywhere in the world, depending on how carbon intensive the grid is in that point in time, or how stressed in time, right? We can also think of the grid stress and give different factors. So that's kind of how originally it was built. But the map at the end of the day is just a showcasing of the data that we have. Our business is actually producing, obtaining, filtering, processing, cleaning all of that data, and then making that data available for two major use cases nowadays. So we deal with sustainability, which I've touched on until now. And then there's also the power markets, which is a segment we've been focused on more and more. That's where people trade electricity, right? There's an auction system in Europe, for example. There are several markets. There's the day-ahead market price, which is the price set for the next day. There's an intraday auction as well, where things get balanced. So the electricity grid is a very complex system that needs to be perfectly in balance at all times. Supply must equal demand in all of the grids for the grid to be stable. If you don't have that, it's bad. And the way we're solving that in Europe is by electricity trading. So there's long-term trading, there's short-term trading, and so on. And our data through our forecasting is made available to different actors that, for example, do classic trading or algorithmic trading. So they train their own algorithms, they look at several markets, and depending on where they see opportunities, they buy and sell at different times or in different locations. And then another growing case we're having right now is the BESS space. So it's battery energy storage systems, which can serve as a buffer on the grid. So there's huge industrial batteries which charge when the grid, ideally, when the grid has surplus energy, and then they discharge when the grid needs it, right? So after the sun goes down in the summer, if there's no wind, there's desperate need for electricity, and batteries can participate in that market. They can participate in a lot more markets. It gets really complicated, but that's kind of what we do. So we offer data through APIs to sustainability and power markets.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot, but that's
It's
great.
a lot.
It sounds complex, which is great.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with, like, because to me it seems like a B2B and B2C together. And how do you deal with, like, you are in marketing and I think that's not easy to express the same message to a business and at the same time to a private consumer. That's very different.
Yeah, so we only monetize to businesses, so that
Okay.
makes it a bit easier from that perspective. So we don't really, our tool is completely free. The map, it has a lot of data for free. What we do monetize is businesses looking to use this in their anything from sustainability reporting to their trading strategy. So as soon as they need data through the API, that's when we start monetizing. So from a marketing perspective, there's that. But I think your question is really good, because one thing that is a challenge for me is that electricity maps has 10 years of history of being used by private consumers. They are the people that like take screenshots of the map and put it on Facebook groups or argue over Twitter using our data. And it's really difficult for me to choose, or rather I have to have pretty strict discipline of when am I doing stuff for those people that ultimately will not add revenue, but can amplify our tool and make it known. And when do I want to focus strictly on companies that will hopefully pay us down the line? And that's really complicated. I need to apply some sort of reasoning to that to understand, like, if I'm building something, say like a cool tool for our website, I have access to all of our data. There's, LLMs now can help you build almost anything. And sometimes I find myself chasing ideas just like in my head, and then halfway through I'm like, wait a minute, does this actually add value where I want it to? And I guess that comes to partly gut feeling, partly kind of thinking about things and discussing it in the team, because it's really hard. You can do a lot of things in the position we're in, and we just need to choose the right ones. And yeah, like we want to maintain all of the free stuff as well. Like, it's part of our company philosophy and so on. Although sometimes it feels like it's a company that doesn't come from that direction doesn't have the same thinking or need to keep those things open, right? If you're a traditional B2B company, you almost offer nothing for free. But that would be weird after 10 years of giving so much information for free to everyone that helped us. I don't know, speaking of SEO, like one thing I checked early on in my job was to see how many backlinks our website and our product have. And it has like 600,000 backlinks, right? It's been covered by the media, by forums. It's used by academics. It's people quoting us in Nature, in New York Times, and like literally everywhere. So there's this balance of like, I need to keep that useful for those people that will continue putting us in the right places, even if it's marginal, right? You can't argue that, I don't know, TechCrunch, well, I mean, maybe that's a bad example, but like a more traditional academic paper that will not necessarily lead to the lead trader at some algorithmic company in Europe buying our data, right?
Yeah.
But it could somehow. So if you give enough amplification, some of that will just kind of get to the right people. But it is tough. It's really tough to separate the two and to kind of keep focus on one. So I guess mentally what I'm trying to say is that I apply a sort of multiple, right? So something needs to be able to reach very far on the B2C side of what we do for me to say that it's worth spending a certain number of resources, as opposed to something more traditional for B2B, like, I don't know, creating content for LinkedIn or going to an event or doing LinkedIn ads towards those people or preparing a report, an industry report using our data and so on.
Yeah, because I think also that aspect, it changed also the way you track your performance, I guess. Like, how do you, like, after a campaign or everything you do, like as a marketing tool, then maybe on one side you can say that some businesses came to buy your product, but on the other side, maybe you have so many consumers, students, everyone is talking about your product, but you don't know how to keep track of that because you're not monetizing that aspect. So
Yeah,
that
exactly.
makes
And I
sense.
think what we are doing internally is like we're trying to bridge that gap a bit, of course. And so, for example, when people sign up to our product, they need to create an account. You don't need to create an account to see all the data, and that's something I'm struggling with a bit internally. But if they do create an account, sometimes they create an account with their business email, for example. So we have some automation in the background that takes everyone that signs up and does a bit of a lookup and tries to figure out, is this a person that could be useful as a B2B customer?
Okay.
And if yes, maybe we want to send them an email and let them know what our B2B offering is. So we are trying to like bridge that gap a bit, but it is definitely not very straightforward, right? Like, and it is actually difficult because you need different metrics for those things, and they weigh differently. So, for example, if our user acquisition on the map, on the free accounts, basically, if that drops by 50% in a month, is that reason enough to panic? And on the other hand, what I have to do is like, okay, I look at that and I look at how about our pipeline generation? How many people signed up for a demo? How many people created a trial account for the B2B side of things? And it might be that maybe what we're doing in general as a company is leading to more pipeline, which is actually what at the end of the day investors care about and what we care about to be able to keep building the other stuff. So it's very easy to get distracted by temporary bumps in like traffic, for example, but you need to look at what matters for you materially as a business to survive and to grow, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a challenge, which is good.
Yeah.
It is, but it's fun.
Yeah, of course. And then also like the
And
aspect that, yeah, sorry, Vero, go ahead if you want.
no, you
Okay.
go. Fine.
Okay. No, like the aspect that is fun is like the map itself that can play the role of a marketing tool, and on the other side, that's your product, kind of.
Yeah.
And maybe like sometimes it's the opposite. Like he starts as a marketing tool, then it becomes the product. Like for our case, for instance, we started a map of startups as a marketing tool because we saw that on LinkedIn, like if you publish a map, everyone's going to talk about that, and the
Yeah.
company is going to put a like, and everything works, and we win. But then
Yeah.
on the other side, I know another website, they started like the startup map as a tool, and then maybe they're becoming something else after. So that's interesting, and that's the same that you are doing. So,
Yeah.
but you think
Yeah.
that's like mainly because you are talking about like a hot topic, kind of hot, if we can call it that, or that there's something that works in other sectors as well.
So I think we're touching here on the idea of like lead magnets. I don't know if people still call them that, but it's essentially you're building something that ideally is interactive, which makes it a bit more sticky, a bit more shareable, a bit more viral, or with the potential to go a bit more viral, which attracts your audience, right? So that's something I've been doing in a lot of the companies I worked for. You have to think of what is my target audience looking for, and can I build something that is ideally unique or difficult to replicate that will bring the interest of the right people to my website or to my product. And the way you incorporate that either in your product or on your marketing website depends on what it is and the industry you're in. But I think that's kind of what you're touching on. And I want to say, like, in general, people love maps. I will say that, like, people really like maps. So that's always a good place to start. And like we kind of get them, we understand them, we like to share them with other people, and I think that's cool. But I think it's ultimately it's that, right? Can you build something that's fairly unique, but also interesting to the right audience. So, your startup map, for example, who is that interesting for? It could be for students that are looking for jobs in startups in particular. And then you kind of build your acquisition funnel around that. You're like, okay, well, did you like this? Maybe you want to sign up to our newsletter where we will tell you about jobs available for startups in Europe. So you kind of have to think of it like you get the attention, but what are you going to do with that? How are you going to capture those leads? That's really nasty commercial thinking, but it is kind of how we think about these things, right? You got some attention. How do you channel that into interest, into educating people more? Maybe there's related tools. Maybe there's a reason for them to sign up. So that's something I think at Electricity Maps we could be doing a bit better. And we've been talking about it recently. We give so much for free, and I touched about this earlier, without you having to log in, that there's almost no reason for you to create an account. And there's this internal pressure of like, we love things being freely available. On the other hand, me as a marketer, I also like to be able to know who's going to our map, right? So if there's someone smack in the middle of our ideal customer profile from a B2B perspective that signs up to our app, I would really, really love to get the chance to at least tell that person what we do otherwise, because they might have gone to the map and not known about all of the other things. So I kind of want them to sign up. And you have to think of like, what's the next step in this conversion journey, so to speak. And I think, the concept of lead magnets leading through how do I turn that attention into interest for my company or for my startup, or convert directly if you have like a self-serve tool or something, which we don't. But yeah, it's definitely one of the more traditional acquisition things, I would say, over the last 10 years that still works.
Yeah, it is also, I think, very interesting the fact that you are able to collect all of this data that come from different sources, and the ability you had to propose them in an appealing way, like useful as well, because I would say that if a product like that can be useful to businesses as well as for consumers that then talk about it, I would say, like, I'm very agreeing on Ale saying that this is a hot topic. I would say also for businesses, as I don't know, I don't have that much experience, but I know like in universities, we are talking so much about sustainability reports, CSR, and also a lot of degrees focusing on sustainability. And I don't know if you had the chance to witness how the job opportunities concerning sustainability have grown over time. And I would say probably Copenhagen is also like one of the perfect cities in which to find like those opportunities. I don't know, what's your view?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, and I'm a bit torn here because I feel like it's at the moment, or for the recent let's say couple of years, I feel like it's been going down a bit in terms of opportunities, sadly. So there's several reasons. I think a lot of people can self-identify what most of them are, but there's the political ones, which probably shouldn't get into, but then there's the business ones. We're going through this like technical transition in the world and the business right now, where let's just say it, AI is out there and it's growing, and it's really kind of like it's out of the bottle and it's not going back in, and the world needs a lot of compute, and that compute needs a lot of electricity, and it needs it fast, and that's really, really difficult to do. So a lot of companies, when given like, after 10 years of going like, we're going to be net zero by whatever, and then this is what we're doing for sustainability, they've done the easy parts, they've done the low-hanging fruit in the first few years, and then they were kind of gearing up to a much more difficult climb. Which, like the second part, let's say if you want to cut your emissions by 50%, that's, I want to say, not easy, but relatively easy. The last 50%, the last 20%, that's where most of the work will go into. And I think coincidentally, we got to that point where the companies had to do the tough stuff at the same time where this really, really big opportunity came on the side that counteracted that. So if you want to build data centers right now, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to do sustainably. Probably impossible. So the companies that saw this opportunity, they're like, well, we can't have both of these. So generally, they went with the economic opportunity, which is something that, sadly, people do. And they kind of stopped caring that much about the sustainability side. Now, I want to make the difference between people. So I think more people than before care about those things. But I think companies care a bit less or are putting fewer resources towards sustainability. So all of this to go a bit back and say, like, I think this is why it's going down a bit. But what is reassuring to me is that I see people, young people, university people, like you guys said, that are learning these things, that are being taught these things, that are learning about all the tools. And when you go out there and you get jobs and you get to have a say now or in a few years, you will drag the world towards better solutions, I believe. So I think that's a really big part of what we need to keep fighting for. And then finally, I would want to say that I think recently I'm seeing that thing swinging back a bit because AI is getting a lot of backlash on sustainability. There's, of course, the water consumption, there's the electricity consumption. All of these things are extremely relevant right now. And I think the amount of scrutiny, the amount of memes, the amount of despair from some people, the amount of all of the attention that's being put on this is making these companies kind of think about it a bit more. And without going too much into details, we have noticed from an interest point of view that in that space, in the AI space, in the data center space, we're getting a bit more interest than before in looking at sustainability solutions. Whereas some other more traditional big tech is caring a bit less about them. This new field, weirdly enough, at least lately over the last few months, seems to be caring a lot more about it. And that's good, right? We need that. That's kind of proof that the societal pressure that we're applying is working to some extent. So there's a glimmer of hope because there have been sustainability titles at like some of the big AI companies lately, and there's some signs that some of them at least are trying. And if they are trying, that's kind of a signal to the market to kind of care a bit more. And I think we all have faith that in a couple of years things will kind of turn back to how they were before. And I have hope and I have faith that it will continue growing back. But it was exciting for a few years. I think between 2020 and 2024, something like that, 2025, things were really on the up. There were a lot of new solutions which will continue to go on the market. There was a lot of funding, and that created opportunities for people to switch from like, I'm a marketer, right? But I can do marketing for a company in sustainability. I don't need to be an expert in carbon accounting, for example, to add value to these companies. And I think that's how young people need to think about it. There's, of course, the very deep sustainability professional, but there's also like sustainability companies. They're just companies. They're startups. They're going to need the same skill set that all the other companies do. And I think if you think about this, if you let this be an important thing to what you want to do with your life, then that will shine through in interview processes, for example. So if you really care about sustainability, you're applying for a company that really cares about it. If you know about their topic, if you know about their domain, you have the first chance at that job. So yeah, I think it's been a bit of a bumpy road, and I'm kind of looking ahead and being hopeful. I think that's how I would maybe sum it up.
Yeah, but I would say also like it is so interesting because, for example, you made available like data that everyone can look for free. And right now, the fact that the opposing trends of people caring about the environment and companies maybe caring a little less, but the fact that right now the practices that companies put in place are kind of like transparent because people they can see more through what companies are doing. And so I feel on the one hand, this makes companies forced to adapt to what people want to see, because otherwise, for me as a young person who cares about the environment and I see that a certain company puts in place some practices which are not sustainable or whatsoever, I'm not buying from that company. So I would say that there is also a need for companies to adapt on this side. So hopefully,
and I think that's exactly it. You're very right. People need to keep applying pressure, right? I think what we've noticed is that legislation is a very slow way of enacting that type of change. So, for example, with carbon emissions, there's the greenhouse gas protocol. There's conversations very, very recently about making that data a lot a lot more accurate. So, I mean, I'm not going to get into details, but in this world, you can buy carbon offsets to say that you didn't emit, although you did emit. You're just buying someone that didn't emit certificates.
Yeah.
The problem is that in our in electricity, something that we really care about is the granularity, and this is both time and space granularity. So if you emitted at that point in time, in that day, in that grid, then your certificates ideally should be traced back to that exact time and place for them to actually be more than an accounting exercise, right? Because if you buy certificates from Portugal, but you're emitting in Norway, and the certificates are from the summer and you're emitting in winter, that doesn't actually mean that much. So the greenhouse gas protocol is trying to change things in that direction. They've been open for consultations. And of course, a lot of companies, that would be a lot more expensive, by the way. A lot of companies are saying, well, we can't because that data doesn't exist. It's too complicated. It's too expensive. We wouldn't be economically competitive anymore. And some of those things are, of course, like they are right. It's like an economic tax on these companies in a way. But that data is available. We make it available for free to a lot of companies. So it's not that it's impossible to do, but it's very difficult to change. There's very little moving on the legislation front. When there is, that takes it has a grace period of 5 to 7 years. So it takes a very long time. The more effective, immediate change we can ask of these companies is through consumers directly. So if you as a consumer, just as you said, Veronica, don't want to buy from that company because they refuse to disclose something, or that they are using a specific ingredient causing deforestation somewhere in the world, then that will show that is the quickest way to make a company change, is to affect their bottom line at the end of the day, right? And that's exactly why we need people to be aware of these problems, why we need people to be curious, to use the free tools available to them, and then to enact change in their personal lives, in their consumption patterns, in their conversations around the dinner table, in sharing these tools with their friends, and so on, because the change needs to come from below as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's for me, also what's funny is that right now, I see, I agree with you that the sustainability, I don't know, the relevance of sustainability now can be seen going a bit down, but at the same time, it should be exactly the opposite, because with AI, that's why sustainability should matter a lot. So that's, I think now everyone is focused on, okay, I have to implement AI to change my company, to make it more effective, more efficient, whatever. And then at the same time, you are just doing something maybe that is not super good for sustainability terms. So that should be definitely the opposite. But I think now we're running out of time, so we have to go closer to the conclusion. Maybe talking about AI, can be AI, can be everything. Can you maybe share one tool that you cannot live without as a marketing lead?
I mean, honestly, it is Claude nowadays. So yeah, sadly, it is AI, and particularly Claude Code, I think, is one tool which I use on the daily. It's so deeply embedded in everything I do nowadays, and that's I have that moral, ethical dilemma as well of, should I use it for every single thing? Should I use it just for the things that I don't know how to do, for example, like coding, which is kind of the primary use case I have. I don't know how to code, so I use it for coding. I think that justifies it to some extent, but anyway, that's saying a lot. It's just that it allows us nowadays to build so much more as marketers. So I've always been a bit of a doer as a marketer. I like to build stuff. I like to make build pages, widgets, and so on. And this just gives me 10x capability compared to what I had before, right? So it's that's definitely one tool. And if we were to go a bit outside of that, I would say I think lately I've had a lot of fun with the tool called Clay. It's pretty well known in the go-to-market space. And that's kind of connecting Clay with a lot of the other tools, including AI, including our CRM system, and so on, to allow us, for example, to what I said earlier. So if someone signs up, creates an account, and they're not a Gmail account, they're from a company that we would love to work with, and I have a list of companies we would love to work with, for example, that pings our sales team and goes, hey, maybe talk to this person, or looks at who that person is and says, hey, this is an intern at that company, as opposed to this is the VP of data acquisition at that company. Go talk to them. So it's lead scoring. It's all of these things nowadays.
Yeah, that's great. And I think Clay, if they want to sponsor our video, since we talk about Clay, whatever, but that's the funny side. No, but that's interesting. It's very tough to find a balance between being efficient. Nowadays, I think you care a lot about sustainability, but if you don't use AI, then many other companies can do exactly the same that you are doing, even better, going very fast, and then of course then your business doesn't stand anymore and doesn't make sense. So it's really like trying to use when like being aware that you have to do it only when you actually need it, like as you were saying, Cloud Code, that's the perfect example, instead of just asking what's the temperature outside. Just go outside and try to see it, like, or use your weather app. Whatever.
Absolutely. I think so. For me, that's kind of how I think about it. If it's, I think of it in not really in efficiency terms, because I think that's like a very top-down view. It's an investor interest, right? It's people with money that want to see you burning less money while producing more money for them. So it's basically increasing the profits of companies because they have an idea, or they heard that you can just make more money with fewer resources. And well, I just think that's, first of all, wrong and very short-sighted. But the way I find it being the most useful is that it allows me to do things that I would not be able to do otherwise.
Yeah.
So that's a very different thing, right? I don't write 10 blog pieces instead of one for my marketing. That's not how I think of using AI. It's building a report or a tool for my website that I wasn't able to build otherwise, right? It's building code to understand long-term trends in our data that I can then produce content about. So it's these things that I would have needed a developer or a data scientist before, and now I can just snap my fingers and it's right there, with all the caveats, right, about precision and so on. But you can make them deterministic in that we deal with data. You write a Python script that executes correctly. If the Python script is written properly, then there's no way it hallucinates processing data, right? Because it's just running on your machine and doing that thing. So that's kind of how I like to think about AI. It's less about like, oh, I'm 10 times more productive. It's just more like I can do stuff I couldn't before. And I think that is justifiable, right? Or at least more justifiable.
Yeah, it makes sense. And then maybe like now, if you can tell us like an advice that you got in your career, like during your career, that you want to share with us, with other students, everything,
your whole experience of multiple companies and changing industries.
A career advice, if we can say.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to that. There's one that I think is very useful, but I'm not sure how material it is if people haven't worked for long enough. And I can share that second, maybe. The first one would be to do things, because you have so many tools like AI nowadays, which allow you to build so many things, as opposed to the way things were 10 years ago, where you needed to spend an enormous amount of time learning different skills to do stuff. So just have fun, experiment, build stuff for fun, not just for productivity or for it. Just it moves your mental model of what can be achieved way further. It expands it a lot. And also, I think when you're going out there in the job market, or when you're early on in your career, it can serve as a really powerful differentiator. So if you think of a job the way people did 10, 20 years ago, it was, I am a performance marketer and I do performance marketing, and that's all I will do every day. And my day is a daily pattern of, I get to work, I look at my ads, I optimize my ads, and so on. Why? Think outside of the box, build a new landing page, try different things, do some A/B testing on all those things. Just go wild out there and figure out, most of them will be flops. Most of them will not add that much value, but it builds who you are, and it shows people that you have sort of like, you can think outside the box. You're determined to go above and beyond. And in general, I think that's kind of what's helped me in my career, that I wasn't stopping at my mandate. I wasn't stopping at, I'm supposed to do this, I'll stop there. I do stuff in my spare time, which maybe doesn't amount to anything, but maybe it amounts to something cool down the line. So I don't know, I built my own website. Now, if I need to build a very small website for work to test a thing, now I have that pattern somewhere, right? I know how to do it. And I think that's one of the things that nowadays is way more available, especially when you're looking for jobs. The difference between applying to a job with a standard template, attaching a CV and putting your name and interests and putting that, Figma 3 out of 5, as opposed to building a prototype for something that's relevant for that job. Maybe you see a line in the job description where they're like, you would be in charge of this, like build a chart flow of what that acquisition funnel would look like. Do an estimated budget, do some mock-ups of those ads or content pieces or whatever. And if you apply with that, which is very easily doable nowadays and scalable, you have the better chance. People will look at it and go like, well, okay, this person clearly put some effort into it, right? So be a doer. I guess that's how I would sum that part up. And then the other part would be something when I was managing more people, I had to repeatedly tell people, because it's very common sense, but it's also very difficult to actually do it in the moment, which is when you're collaborating with people or people come to you and telling you to do stuff, I need this done by tomorrow or something, right? That's just a random example. You need to ask why. Like, why do they need that? What exactly are they trying to solve? What exactly are they trying to do? Because people will come to you, let's say, again, you're a marketer, let's say a content marketer. People come to you and they're like, I want a one-pager for this. Sales might come to you with that. I want a one-pager to do that. And if you ask why, they have to think about it and they have to tell you the problem they're trying to solve. And then you, being the subject matter expert, you come up with the right solution. People come to you with solutions instead of with problems. And you need to flip that around all the time to be able to work properly, because you might say, okay, I'll get it done. You do it. That doesn't work because they didn't identify the right solution. And although they came to you with the solution, and then that doesn't move the needle, you just spent a day or two working on something that doesn't work at all. Then people complain that didn't work, and so on and so forth. But if you ask instead, why do you need that? You can come up with a better solution, because if people come to you, you're the subject matter expert to what they're trying to work on. So flip that around, ask people why, and walk through with them, and then maybe suggest alternative solutions. Of course, they have to approve it and so on, but you can convince them that is the right solution. And then hopefully you'll spend your resources on the right things. Hope that makes sense.
That's so valuable.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it can be applied a lot in a lot of day-to-day situations. But it's one of those things that when you think about it, it's common sense. But when you're in the moment, it's so much easier to just say like, sure, I'll get it done, than to push back. Sometimes you need to fight your battles, right? Sometimes it makes sense. Like sometimes it's like so obvious that, of course. But when it's things that you'll spend time on and resources on, that you then need to justify why you spend that many resources on it, it's best you figure out the problem and not just the solution directly.
That makes sense. Yeah, like totally. And then like, are you hiring right now electricity maps? Like are you expanding a team?
Not my team. So I just hired a content marketer a few months ago. That was my first and only planned hire so far.
Okay.
We are right now recruiting for a data scientist. So we have a data team. They're looking for a data scientist. And that's the only role we have open as of now. But, things come and go, things change. So we have a career page people can keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's it for today. I think we run a bit out of time. So that was
Sorry
great.
about
Like no, it's not you. Like we could talk all day. But like I think there are many topics that we should go deeper and really understand, like the reasoning behind. But I'm sure like what you're building, that's for sure like it matters a lot right now, and it can definitely have a real impact on society, and maybe in the upcoming years even more. So
let's hope so.
I I'm sure we're gonna hear good things about electricity maps and what you're building. So that's great.
Thank you.
We can get a little bit of closure. So thank you so much for be here today and having this chat with us. And if you want to check the electricity map website, for the link is in the description. And thank you, Dragos.
That was great.
And see you in the next time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
It was
you.
a lot of fun. Thank you.